I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar entitled The 2025 Employment Compliance Outlook, Some Key Regulations and Strategic Workforce Solutions. Today's session is brought to you and presented by a team here at Astrix. And a quick thing, this information is going to be for educational use only, so obviously consult business policy and/or legal counsel for any key topics that might be discussed today. With that, we'll go ahead and get kicked off. We can go to the next slide, please. So briefly, before we get into the session, just want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about who Astrix is, what we do in this space, and why we're talking to you today. We are a company that is a professional services company. We do a combination of consulting for technology as well as scientific and technical staffing. So obviously a staffing organization, very familiar with a lot of the ins and outs on the HR side of the fence. And for over 28 years, we've brought a very unique blend of these specialized strategic and technical services, processes, and technology agnostic approach that's made us very much a leading partner in helping to transform the success of life science companies throughout the world. We've been doing this now for over 28 years. And one of the things that we like to tell people, we're very proud of here, is that over 90% of the employees here at Astrix hold advanced science degrees. So we're very much a company that is laser focused in the life science community and very much staffed by life science professionals. So that's just a little bit about who we are. You can certainly learn more about us online at astrixinc.com, which you'll see at the end. And I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So that'll be the next slide. So we have Nguyen. She's the human resource manager here, very seasoned professional, over decade experience, driving employee engagement, compliance, operational excellence. We're thrilled to have Gwyn, obviously, as a team member here at Astrix, and even more so to have an opportunity for her to speak to you all today. And Phil Poletti is joining us as well. He's managing director on our staffing services and recruitment side of the fence. He brings over 2 decades of experience in this industry. Phil's a seasoned leader, known for helping to drive growth and build high-performing teams that deliver excellent client solutions. So we're thrilled to have both Gwyn and Phil with us. Phil, I think you're going to get things started off, so I'm going to go ahead and hang back and enjoy the presentation. I'll be back on at the end to help with some Q&A.
All right, well, Kevin, thank you very much for that introduction. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Phil Poletti, and I'm a managing director here at Astrix. I'm joined today by my colleague Gwyn, our HR manager, as Kevin mentioned, and we're excited to guide you today through some of the most significant compliance updates and challenges businesses are facing here in 2025 and beyond. Just a quick note before we get started, and to piggyback on what Kevin mentioned earlier, once this webinar has concluded, you will receive an email from us that's going to include the activity code that you'll need in order to get those SHRM and HRCI credits. Okay, well, as you know, the regulatory landscape is constantly evolving here in 2025. And staying ahead of these changes is critical for avoiding risks and maintaining operational efficiency in your organization. So today we're going to cover a number of topics. First off, we're going to cover federal compliance updates, including changes introduced by HR 1 and new overtime thresholds as well. We're going to address state-specific challenges that are creating a number of compliance requirements, immigration and work authorization trends, including e-verify mandates, wage law updates, that includes pay transparency, along with minimum wage increases. We're going to cover the growing role of AI in employment decisions and the legal landscape that surrounds that. And finally, we're going to talk about how staffing partnerships can serve as a strategic tool for managing these compliance risks. Throughout the webinar, we're going to share with you some actionable insights and strategies that'll help you navigate these changes effectively. And as we go, we'll highlight how working with a staffing partner like Astrix can help alleviate some of these compliance burdens on your organization and allow you to focus on what you do best in achieving your core business goals. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. And Gwyn, let's go ahead and start with those federal compliance updates. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Oh, it looks like we're already at the next slide, which is great. So let's dive into those key federal compliance updates that have taken effect this year and what they mean for employers. First, HR 1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, became public law 119-12 on July 4th, 2025. This law extends and adjusts several of the elements of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The new bill introduces new international tax rules, remittance on excise taxes, and changes to business interest deductions. These updates will trickle down to payroll coding, W-2 reporting, and quarterly filings. While we're still waiting on detailed guidance from the IRS and Treasury, it is important to start preparing now by reviewing your current practices within payroll reporting and filing. Next, let's talk about the overtime thresholds. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FSLA, as most of us know, as of January 1, 2025, the salary threshold for exempt, administrative, and professionals employees increased to $1,128 per week. And the threshold for highly compensated employees rose to $151,164 annually. These changes mean that more positions will need to be reclassified as non-exempt, or you have to bump the pay of those positions, which these things could also impact our payroll systems and timekeeping processes. Automatic updates to these thresholds will begin in 2027. Another critical update is the independent contractor test. The Department of Labor's 6-factor economic reality rule, which was effective March 2024, remains the key standard for determining worker classification. This rule includes the likelihood that some contractors may be reclassified as employees, which could have significant implications on wage and hour compliance. Next slide. On the labor relations front, the NLRB joint employer standards remain governed by the 2020 rule, which focused on direct and immediate control. The broader 2023 rule was vacated, so for now, the 2020 standard provides some clarity for employers. One good news story for employers is the PAID program, or paid program, which has been reinstated. And this program allows employers to voluntarily self-report and resolve wage and FMLA violations. So it's a great opportunity for businesses to correct their mistakes efficiently while avoiding litigation. Finally, as we all know, there are now new executive orders that the president recently signed that could potentially influence how businesses use AI, especially in federal procurement, which may impact vendor and contractor requirements. We would recommend that you all stay vigilant to those changes or guidance as they arise. Overall, any passive, non-compliant increases in your exposures to audits, lawsuits, back pay, awards, can often lead to wage and hour litigation spikes after those threshold changes because classification error and timekeeping errors, which can be very common. These updates highlight the importance of staying proactive and informed. And this is where a staffing partner can make a real difference. For example, staffing agency's payroll structure is designed to automatically update with the IRS and Treasury guidance. So you're not scrambling to have to recode your systems, reclassify your employees. Phil, did you want to add anything about how these changes might impact businesses?
Absolutely. So as Gwen mentions, all these changes can underscore or really underscore the need for your organization to have robust compliance systems. For example, the new overtime thresholds and independent contractor rules could require significant adjustments to payroll and also classification processes. Employers should really take advantage of programs like PAID to address potential compliance issues before they escalate. Also, as Gwen mentioned, staffing partners like Astrix can help alleviate these burdens by acting as the employer of record, sometimes abbreviated as an EOR. They take on the compliance risk for their own staff, including reclassifications, salary adjustments, and also payroll updates. This allows your human resources team to focus on your strategic initiatives as opposed to getting bogged down with all these compliance details. Okay, Gwyn, let's shift gears. Let's talk about these state level changes and all the compliance challenges they're creating. I'll let you take that away.
Thanks, Phil. Can we move to the next slide? Great, thank you. While federal regulations usually set the baseline, state level changes can often add complexity, especially for employers that are in multiple states. Now let's look at a few recent examples of changes that have been made. In California, 2 new laws were signed as of July 30th, 2025. So SB 693, which creates a meal period exception for certain water corporation employees, while SB 648 empowers the Division of Labor and Standards Enforcement to cite or sue for gratuities taken or withheld under the Labor Code 315. Meanwhile, in Michigan, the state Supreme Court's Rayford decision requires reasonable reviews for boilerplate agreements that shorten limitation periods. This ruling makes adhesion clauses more vulnerable. So more employers should reconsider the 180-day limits in handbooks and offer letters. Challenges with state laws is that they often take place in mid-year without any sort of transition period, which leaves employers scrambling to comply. This is where having a live compliance tracker or a compliance individual within your organization can make a big difference. Phil, what are your thoughts on managing these at a state level?
Yeah, thanks, Gwyn. So all these state level changes can be particularly challenging for multi-state employers. And I know there are several of you on this call today. It's challenging because they require constant monitoring along with quick adjustments. For example, California's gratuity rules or Michigan's limitations period rulings that can catch you employers off guard. So this is another area where staffing partners like Astrix can be of assistance. Agencies that employ contingent workers are responsible for tracking these state-specific rules, issuing compliant pay statements, and absorbing any penalties for wage calculation errors. So for example, when Michigan challenged the 180-day limitation periods, staffing agencies updated their own offer packs and handbooks, sparing clients from rewriting policies for their temporary staff. So by partnering with a staffing agency like Astrix, you can certainly ensure compliance without having to overhaul your internal processes every time one of these state law changes, and they're changing very often. Now let's move on to another critical area, and that would be immigration and work authorization. Gwyn, I'm going to let you take this one on the next slide.
Great, thanks so much, Phil. So as we all know, immigration work authorizations are becoming more and more increasingly complex with significant changes coming up on the horizon. One of the major trends is that the expansion of E-Verify mandates within the states. So over a dozen states have proposed stricter requirements, including increased penalties and reduced sizes for thresholds for mandatory participation. In addition, E-Verify's new status change report, which tracks revoked or expired employment authorization documents, are required for real-time verification. Missing a single update on this could lead to ICE fines. We're also seeing active litigation and policy divergence, such as challenges to hiring policies for undocumented students. Next slide. The key takeaway from this is to ensure compliance is essential, and employers should continue to expect more and more invariability across the states. Phil, how can businesses manage these challenges effectively?
Yeah, super important stuff, Gwyn. Managing these immigration compliance requires centralized systems and lots of robust processes. Employers should really centralize I-9 and E-Verify processes with audit trails, and they should configure alerts for status changes also. So this is another area where staffing partners like Astrix can provide significant value for employers. Agencies complete and store I-9s, they manage re-verification triggers, they also assume liability for errors. For high turnover or maybe seasonal workforces, staffing agencies already have centralized compliance teams monitoring state-by-state e-verify rules, so you don't have to. Okay, let's move on to the next slide and talk about wage law updates and pay transparency. Gwyn?
We all know how fun these are. Thanks, Phil. Wage law updates are another area where employers need to stay vigilant. 9 states have adopted pay range disclosure requirements for job postings, with effective dates that have been staggered throughout 2025 and 2026. These laws aim to promote pay transparency, but also create a compliance risk if the job postings are not updated correctly. In addition, over 20 states have increased the minimum wage in 2024, with several set to reach that $15 per hour or more by 2026. Pay transparency can lead to public relations and legal challenges. Job postings are visible evidence for everybody to see your compliance or non-compliance. So we do recommend, employers building some geo-differential compensation bands that are adaptable to postings and stay ahead of these changes. Let's move to the next slide. Phil, can you help explain how employers could handle that?
Yep, thanks, Gwyn. So we absolutely recommend that employers should also incorporate a wage indexation calendar, not only into their budgets, but into their vendor agreements as well. And this would just be to ensure that they're prepared for any future changes, and we know there are future changes that are always coming. If you're working with a staffing partner like Astrix, they can take on this responsibility of managing pay disclosures and wage compliance. This shifts the compliance burden to the agency, allowing you to continue to focus on your core business goals, which we know is what's most important. Okay, well, let's discuss everyone's favorite topic these days, and that would be the evolving role of AI in employment decisions. If we can move to the next slide, Gwyn, I'll turn that over to you.
Thanks again. Yeah, AI. There is so much that is happening with AI, and it is transforming the workplace. But with this transformation also comes significant obligations from employers to pay more attention to the new laws, regulations, things like that that are coming out. For example, New York City's local law 144 requires biased audits, notices, and public summaries for AI tool use in hiring and promotion. The next slide. Similarly, Colorado's AI Act, which goes into effect February 2026, classifies most employment AI as high risk, requiring human overview, governance, and annual audits. So employers must navigate the rapidly evolving landscape as AI continues to play a larger role in hiring, performance management, and even in workplace surveillance. While AI tools can help to improve efficiency, they can also introduce risk, such as potential bias in decision-making or non-compliance with anti-discrimination laws. To mitigate these risks, employers should treat AI as a regulated process. This means creating an AI governance register that tracks each tool's use, data source, bias, testing, and vendor assurances. This is also critical to ensure human oversight in any of the decision-making processes, especially for high-stakes decisions like hiring and promotions. Phillip, can you tackle how staffing can play a role in this? Next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Gwyn. So I think most of us agree AI tools, especially in this space, can be incredibly powerful, but they absolutely have to be used responsibly. Now, employers, you need to be aware that even if you're using third-party AI tools, you remain liable under existing anti-discrimination laws for the outcomes of those tools. Let me just repeat that one more time because I think it's a very important point for you. Employers, you need to be aware that using third-party AI tools, you still remain liable under these anti-discrimination laws for the outcomes given to you by these tools. So another area where staffing partners like Astrix can help, agencies like ours that use AI for candidate screening, they're responsible for conducting bias audits, publishing notices, maintaining compliance documentation. If the staffing agency is your employer of record, they assume that legal responsibility for these processes, in turn insulating your organization from compliance gaps. So by partnering with a staffing agency like Astrix, you can leverage these benefits of AI, which are great, but at the same time, you can minimize your risk. Okay, let's move on to our final section. And in this section, we're going to cover how staffing can be a strategic compliance tool. Okay, well, throughout today's webinar, we've highlighted how complex and fast changing the compliance landscape has become here in 2025. From federal updates like HR1 that Gwyn mentioned, and overtime and thresholds to state-specific laws and AI regulations, it's crystal clear that managing compliance is no small task these days. This is where staffing partnerships can come in and play a critical role for you. So I'll outline 3 key advantages of working with a staffing partner. And I'm going to start off with risk transfer. Now, we talked about this a lot, but when you work with a staffing agency, they act as the employer of record for the contingent workers. What does this mean? This means they take on legal responsibility for pay, classification, I-9, E-Verify compliance, job postings, wage statements, that whole thing. If there's an audit or investigation, the staffing agency is then the first responder. They're your front line, so to speak, and they produce records and they handle all agency inquiries. Number 2, built-in compliance tracking. So staffing agencies like Astrix have dedicated teams and technology that monitor state and federal rule changes, and all of this is in real time. This ensures your contingent workforce remains compliant, even as these laws can change mid-year or across multiple jurisdictions. Third, we'll talk about audit support. Now, again, in the event of an audit or investigation, the staffing agencies are equipped to provide the necessary documentation and respond to these inquiries. This greatly reduces the administrative burden on your HR team and certainly minimizes disruption to your business operations. So by partnering with a staffing agency like Astrix, we can certainly offload many of the compliance risks so that you can focus on your core business goals. Gwyn, do you want to add anything about how staffing partners can support compliance efforts?
Absolutely, Phil. One of the biggest advantages of working with a staffing partner is their ability to adapt quickly to regulatory changes. For example, when Michigan introduced the new limitation period rules, staffing agencies updated their offer packets and handbooks immediately, ensuring compliance without requiring the client to rewrite their own policies for their temporary staff. Staffing agencies also bring in expertise in areas like wage and hour compliance, immigration, and AI governance. They have resources that manage these complex processes, such as pay transparency, disclosures, and E-Verify re-verifications, so you don't have to. Ultimately, using a staffing partner isn't just a resource for filling headcount, it's a strategic ally in managing the compliance risks and staying ahead of regulatory changes. All right, so to wrap up, let's review some of the key points that we've covered today. Federal compliance updates such as HR1 and the new overtime thresholds require proactive planning and adjustments to payroll and classification processes. State level changes like California's gratuity rule and Michigan's limitations period ruling highlight the need for real-time compliance tracking. Let's see here. Next slide. Immigration and work authorization trends, including e-verify mandates, decentralized systems, and robust processes, help to avoid fines. Wage and law updates, such as pay transparency and minimum wage increases, require careful planning and ensure compliance across multiple jurisdictions. And then, of course, lastly, AI in employment decision-making introduces new risks and compliance obligations, making governance and oversight critical. Even when you outsource, it's important to monitor state law changes and federal changes that could create joint employer exposure.
Yeah, Gwen, that's exactly right. And as we've discussed, staffing partnerships can be an extremely valuable tool for managing these challenges. By acting as your employer of record, staffing agencies can take on many of these compliance risks, from wage and hour laws to AI governance that we've been discussing here this afternoon. I'd like you to think of staffing not just as a way to fill headcount, but as a strategic compliance risk management tool. With the right partner, you can certainly navigate the ever-changing regulatory landscape with confidence and continue to focus on what matters most, which is, of course, growing your business. Okay, well, now that we've covered the main topics, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about the compliance updates we discussed or how staffing partnerships can support your business, please feel free to ask. We're certainly here to help.
Great, thank you, Phil. And Gwen, great content as always. Appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the recording part of the session. We usually